One of the core teachings that we find in Buddhism is to understand the pain and suffering as a part of life, and also to see the suffering and the pain as it is. But this is easier said than done, okay? Because most of the time, when we go through painful feelings and painful situations in life, we used to worry, we used to become frustrated, and we fall down mentally. But the Buddha offers us a different way of thinking to see this pain and to see this suffering, to use that experience to add more meaning to our life. So today, let's talk about how can we move through painful situations in life according to Buddhism. The Buddha gives a wonderful simile for this. The Buddha says, suppose they were to strike a man with a dart, and then they would strike him immediately afterwards with a second dart, so that the man would feel a feeling caused by two darts, two arrows. When the uninstructed worldling is being contacted by a painful feeling, he feels two feelings: bodily, physical feeling, and the mental feeling, or physical suffer and mental suffer. The reason why we worry in the face of this unavoidable suffering in our life is we expect a life without suffering. But life itself has the intrinsic nature and inherent nature of suffering and pain and unsatisfied nature. So what Buddha teaches us is to see it as a part of life. Do not try to forget it. Do not try to run away from it. See it as a part of your life that always persists throughout your life. And the Buddha says that when an ordinary person goes through these feelings, to escape from this pain, what he does is he seeks delight in sensual pleasures. He chases behind sensual pleasures to distract himself. So that is the normal reaction, isn't it? Normally, when someone goes through a painful feeling, when someone goes through a difficult time in his life, they chase behind sensual pleasure to distract their brains, distract their mind from that pain. For an example, when someone is struggling in their life, if someone has pain in his mind, sometimes some people use alcohol. Some people distract them with alcohol. Some people distract them with sexual misconduct. Some people distract themselves with consuming more and more social media. These days, it is happening more and more. Okay. For an example, if you feel any pain in your life, just check your behavior. People use more and more social media. Why? To distract themselves with that pain, from that pain. But Buddha does not say that chasing behind the sensual pleasure is completely wrong. What Buddha says is that chasing behind sensual pleasure does not solve your problem completely. Why is that? So the more we chase behind sensual pleasure, the more we suffer because of the unsatisfied nature. So that is why the Buddha said, chasing behind sensual pleasure does not solve your problem completely. Why it does not solve the problem completely? Because whenever we are being struck by a miserable feeling or a painful feeling in life, now we need something material, an external source to distract ourselves all the time. Now, this does not help us to focus on ourselves and find the true nature of this problem and solve it once and forever. Okay, so that is why the Buddha said, chasing behind sensual pleasure will not completely solve your problem. Instead of chasing behind the sensual pleasure to distract ourselves, the Buddha says that look at the pain as a part of life that is unavoidable. And the Buddha says that pain is an inevitable condition in life, but worrying is an option that we choose. Worrying is always optional. So the Buddha used a special term to these ups and downs in life. He called it 8 worldly conditions. The Buddha said that these 8 worldly conditions prevails in this world every time. The Buddha says, gain and loss, dispute and fame, blame and praise, and pleasure and pain. These 8 worldly conditions revolve around the world, and the world revolves around these 8 worldly conditions. So these 8 worldly conditions are like the 2 faces of the same coin. We cannot separate it. So the Buddha says that do not worry too much, more than needed, about these painful situations in life. Rather than worrying about it, we always have the choice to stay away from worrying, because pain is an inevitable condition, but worrying is an optional thing, is a choice that we make in our life. So keep this amazing sentence in your mind. Pain is inevitable, worrying is optional. Keep that in your mind and stay strong, stay safe. Namo Buddhaya. From today's video, we're going to discuss about one of the major problems that we go through in our mind when it comes to the stress and anxiety. And that is the what if scenarios, the catastrophizing of mind. Now, this state of mind can affect for many people, and they suffer a lot when these kind of thought patterns hit their mind, right? So what if scenarios are like, you imagine all the worst case scenarios in your mind, like what if that happened to me? What if everything went wrong? What if they're cheating me? What if the people all around are up to no good? So we expect and we create these scenarios in our mind, and we suffer in it. Okay. And our brain is pretty good at creating these scenarios in our mind, right? So that is why we need to learn how to deal with these kind of thoughts when they come into our mind. Not every time we get these kind of thoughts, but when there are certain times that we get these kind of mental states, and it's very painful, and people suffer a lot in these kind of thought patterns. And this is where the Buddhist practice of mindfulness comes in handy, right? In Buddhist practice, we call mindfulness as sati. Sati is the bringing your mind to this present state and understanding the reality as it is, right? So when you understand the true nature of reality, when you understand that everything, every experience, every mental state has one intrinsic nature, and that is the changing. Every mental state, every experience is subjected to changing, right? But before doing that, there are certain things that we need to understand, and we need to think and practice to deal with these kind of catastrophizing thoughts, right? These what if scenarios. The first practice is we need mindfulness to understand this, because we need to catch this thought, right? Without you catching this thought and understanding and realizing this thought, you cannot do anything, right? You cannot deal with anything that you don't understand about. So the first step is to know that you're in the mental state of catastrophizing, right? What if scenarios. So the first step is to understand and challenge your thought, right? How to challenge your thoughts. Now, in this practice, we need mindfulness. We need to catch this thought, right? And understand as it is. And then ask the question from yourself that, is this the reality, or is this just another distortion of my mind about the reality of the life, right? Because the mind and our brain can distort the reality in many ways. It can create many scenarios, but in reality, the problem is very, very little. Right? Sometimes there is no problem. I've seen this a lot of times in mind, that when we don't have much things to worry about, right? When the life goes smoothly, we worry about even about the little things in life. Okay? So that is why first we need to understand, is this reality, or is this another distortion of my mind about the reality? Right? When you understand this, when you come to this present moment and understand what reality is, then you find that there are very few things that we need to worry about, and many things, right? 99% of what we go through is just another distortion of our mind, right? So challenging your thought is very important when you deal with these kinds of mental states. And once you understand the reality, now then you can ask from yourself that, what can I do about it? Is there anything that is under my control that I can take some actions to change this state, right? And then you understand that there are certain things in life that are under your control and that are not under your control, that are out of your control. So then you have to realize that the things that are under your control is totally worth worrying and totally worth taking actions. And the things that are not under your control, we don't have anything to do about it. And also we can't change that state. So what we can do is we can accept it, right? Once you realize the reality, one thing that you can do is to understand what is in your control and what is not in your control. And that is the next thing that you have to do. And once you understand the present state of mind, now you can add a little mindful practice to your life, right? Such as breathing meditation, right? A mindful in-breath and out-breath will help you to relieve your stress. Okay, this is something the Buddha introduced us to do, and Buddha emphasizes to do, to stop the chattering of your mind, to stop this restlessness of your mind. Because once you're in these kind of mental states, one thing that happens to your mind is you become restless. So a mindful breathing practice will help you to relieve the anxiety and relieve the stress from your mind and become more peaceful and calm. And there's another practice that you can do, and this is not directly mentioned in Buddhism, but you can set a time to worry about things, right? So what you have to do when the worryings and when these regrets and these kind of thought patterns come into your mind, say to yourself, okay, wait, there is a time in my day to worry about these things. So wait until that. I will wait until that. And when that time comes, I will do my worrying, I will do my regretting. So what you do, you set an alarm to yourself that I will worry in the future. So then set a maybe time period during the day that you sit down and think, okay, what is there in my mind and in my life to worry about, right? And to check the reality. And then you spend a good time. You don't spend that time worrying and regretting. You spend that time analyzing and not overthinking, but analyzing and realizing about the reality of the life and the present state of life, so that you find there are very few things to worry about in life. And all the other things that our mind has created inside our mind are just nothing but distortions of reality. So these are the few practices that you can add to your life. Whenever you get these kind of thought patterns, practicing these tips will help you to ease up your mental state. So practice this and make your mind peaceful and calm. Namo Buddhaya.